15 years as a music teacher. Then one day, a Special Forces security team appeared and crowded her house. For 15 years, Elena Marlowe lived as a quiet music teacher in a lakeside town, hiding her past behind piano keys and children's laughter. But the night, a microphone exploded in the middle of the hall, forcing Elena to reveal her true identity. Echo, the genius agent the military once had. Before we go back, tell me where you're watching from. And if this story touches you, make sure you subscribe, because tomorrow I have something special for you. A dry pop sound resounded, followed by a piercing screech, echoing throughout the dome of the auditorium. The children covered their ears, some of them burst into tears. The adults were in a panic, and the orchestra suddenly stopped mid-performance. The burnt microphone fell to the wooden floor with a clack that seemed to tear the festive atmosphere apart. A technical team rushed to fix the microphone, fumbling with cables, disassembling and reassembling each device. Sweat poured down their foreheads, but the screech was still horribly loud, like fingernails scratching on a blackboard. The adults covered their ears while the children sobbed. All attempts to save the group failed. Elena Marlowe, 38, her curly brown hair tied in a hastily knotted knot, her hands, used to teaching her students, shaking as she stood motionless in the wings. She had only come to this public performance to replace her colleague, Mr. Reed, who had been called away because his son was hospitalized. Elena had no intention of standing on the main stage, much less getting involved in the chaos before her eyes. But the children's cries, the organizers' pleading eyes, and especially the heavy void in the middle of the silent auditorium of hundreds of people, all pressed her. Let me try. Her voice rang out, small but firm. The engineers looked up abruptly. One of them frowned, looking at the figure of a woman with neatly tied brown hair and a simple cardigan. "You are?" he asked, half surprised and half suspicious. Elena just smiled evasively, not answering directly. "I used to work with these types of devices. Many years ago." The sentence was half true, half hidden. They hesitated for a moment, then decided to nod, giving way in front of the control panel. The shoes clicked clack on the wooden floor, drowning out the screeching sound. And in an instant, the entire hall turned their eyes to that woman. Elena paused, her eyes darkening slightly, but instead of retreating, she closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and suddenly leaned over to check the corner of the amplifier's back. Her fingers ran quickly through the tangle of wires, tapping the beat as if listening to a piece of music. "No, it's not dead," she whispered. She quickly pulled out a plug, switched it, and turned the volume knob in a decisive rhythm. The shrill screech suddenly stopped, replaced by a thick silence. The entire hall held its breath. Then the microphone lit up, emitting a low, steady buzz. There was silence for a few seconds before a collective sigh of relief escaped from the hundreds of people. All eyes turned to Elena, the ordinary woman with her hair tied back, now standing silently in front of the control panel, her hands still shaking slightly. Elena clenched her fists, trying to stay calm, but she knew deep down each of those movements had not been random. It was an old instinct, one she had tried to bury for the past 15 years. The final sound echoed throughout the auditorium, as if an invisible hand had just cleared away the chaos with just a gentle movement. The entire hall fell into absolute silence. A silence that made Ellie's every heartbeat echo back into her own ears. Then, the applause erupted in a loud, excited, and surprised round. The parents who had just been annoyed by the noise suddenly turned to look at each other in amazement, their mouths wide open. As for the children, some smiled brightly, some jumped up in excitement. All of them turned their eyes towards the stage. But Ellie did not feel relieved. On the contrary, she felt a chill down her spine. One of the engineers in the technical team, the salt-and-pepper-haired man who had been fiddling with the control panel the whole time, was the first to speak. He stared at her, as if he had just witnessed a phenomenon that went beyond all laws. What the hell did you just do?" Ellie pursed her lips, gripping the microphone tightly in her hand, feeling the cold metal dig into her sweaty palm. "I was just lucky," she evaded, her eyes darting away, searching for an escape. "Probably just a coincidence." "Coincidence?" A younger engineer, his face still stained with oil ink, laughed harshly, half in surprise and half in mockery. "This system we tried for an hour without success, and you just touched a few buttons and it went silent as if there had never been an error? You call that a coincidence?" Ellie did not reply, only bowed her head slightly, avoiding their scrutinizing gazes. In the audience, the applause grew louder and louder. Some even stood up, whistled, and shouted, "Awesome!" A little girl from the second row innocently shouted, "Teacher, you are so good!" Ellie's heart tightened. She felt like all the spotlights were pointing straight at her, exposing everything she had buried for so many years. She couldn't stay here another second. Ellie quickly put the microphone down on the table, forced a smile to thank the audience, then turned and walked away quickly. The sound of her shoes echoed on the dry wooden floor, mixed with the rising applause. She ran backstage, her hands shaking, taking heavy breaths. In the dim light of the backstage corridor, she leaned against the old painted wall, her hand pressed against her chest to calm her racing heart. Just once, Ellie. Just once. And then go back to normal life. She wanted to believe that, but she was wrong. In the distance, behind the dark rows of seats that the stage lights couldn't reach, there was a pair of eyes still watching her. Those eyes were cold, seeing through the shell that Ellie had tried to build for so long. Ellie unconsciously felt a chill run down her spine, a vague intuition that today, somehow, she had stepped out of her comfort zone and could never go back to the way it was before. The sound of applause was still echoing, but Elena had already disappeared from the bright lights of the stage. She stealthily retreated behind the wings, her hands still shaking slightly, as if she had not yet had time to hide the truth that had just been revealed to hundreds of people. She bowed her head, quickly put on her thin coat, hoping to blend into the darkness like an anonymous person. But Elena did not know that in the row near the end, 4 men in civilian clothes had not taken their eyes off her from the first moment. They quietly observed, took notes. Their sharp eyes seemed to want to penetrate every mask she wore. Sitting among them was Colonel Marcus Hayes, a strong, experienced face with cold eyes but containing dangerous curiosity. A young officer sitting next to him spoke up. "Do you see?" He continued to whisper, "Her movements are not like those of a normal person." Another officer spoke up. The way she deliberately concealed it was also very strange. Normal people, when faced with praise, would be proud, would enjoy that adulation, but that girl was just scared. Marcus did not answer immediately. He looked towards the empty stage, where the scene had just witnessed Elena lifting an object that was beyond human strength. It was only a moment, but it was enough to remind him of the top-secret files he had read about projects that had never been made public. Marcus stood up, his voice resolute. "A small event like that, nothing is certain. Prepare to approach and investigate Elena. If she really is the person we are looking for, proceed as planned." In the days that followed the concert, Elena's life seemed to return to its normal course. She went to school in the morning, teaching the children simple pieces on the old piano. In the afternoon, she stopped by the town library, returning some borrowed textbooks to her students. In the evening, she found herself alone in her second-floor apartment overlooking the pier, pouring herself a cup of jasmine tea, opening a new music book, and quietly jotting down a few random melodies. Elena gradually convinced herself that everything at the concert was just an incident. People applauded, praised, and quickly forgot about it. The children were innocent, diving into their new homework the next day. The adults were busy with work. Who would pay attention to an elementary school music teacher for long? She repeated the thought like a prayer, to ward off the fear that she had revealed something. But the truth was different. In the darkness of a rented room a few miles from town, Marcus Hayes and 3 officers continued to watch. They searched Elena's public records, Birth year, education, medical records, residential address. Everything was clean. Too clean even. An absurd perfection. "There's not a scratch," a young officer commented, pushing the file toward Marcus. "This person is either a normal citizen or the file has been redone." Marcus didn't reply. He stared at Elena's portrait, tapping his fingers on the table, slowly. "We won't suddenly expose her. She's been hiding for years, which means she knows how to hide. To determine, we have to let her reveal herself." Time passed by almost a week after the performance. Elena was cleaning the music room after the weekend class when she saw a tall, middle-aged man in a brown khaki jacket holding an old laptop. He stood in front of the classroom door, a little embarrassed, like a parent who had found the wrong room. "Excuse me, are you the music teacher here?" His voice was low, slightly hoarse, but warm and polite. Elena nodded, wary but still smiling politely. "Yes, I'm Elena. How can I help you?" The man smiled awkwardly, holding up his laptop. "It's strange to ask you this, but I just received a recording file from my son. He's away on a training trip, sent me some music. But my computer has some problems. The sound is distorted, mixed with howling. I can't make out anything. I see you here. You're a music teacher. You definitely know more about sound than I do. Can you help me?" Elena paused. Part of her wanted to refuse. She didn't want to get involved in the side story, but his sincere eyes and urgent tone made her feel awkward. Plus the mention of son sending music files evoked a bit of sympathy. She nodded slightly. "Okay, I'll try." They sat down at the wooden table in the music room. Elena opened her laptop, her eyes immediately recognizing that the system settings were not those of a normal civilian machine. Although the interface looked simple, there were layers of code hidden behind it. Only those who had worked with signal security systems would feel the abnormality. It was Marcus, pretended to be impatient. "I just need to hear his voice. He said he recorded a piece of music for me, but every time I played it, it howled. I didn't understand anything." Elena breathed slowly, thinking to herself that she must be thinking too much. This man was simply an old father who wanted to hear the sound his son sent, so her fingers began to operate. She went to the adjustment section, realizing that the audio frequency was being jammed in a very military way. Not a software error, but a layer of code that was intentionally transformed into noise. She was surprised, but still tried to keep her face calm. In a matter of minutes, with moves that would have been unthinkable to a normal sound engineer, Elena stripped away the code. The howling stopped, the sound waves returning to music. A melody played. Not a children's song nor a pop song. It was a coded signal sequence, using melody to hide commands, a technique known only to a few signals intelligence specialists in the world. Elena's heart suddenly tightened, because that signal sequence was something she had created, and more importantly, hidden in it was an old code name that she had thought had disappeared forever. Echo. Elena dropped her hands from the keyboard, her face pale. She looked at the screen, then at the man. "You said this file came from your son?" Her voice was hoarse. Marcus smiled faintly, closing the laptop as if he had achieved his goal. "Yes, from a relative. And clearly, only you can decipher it." Elena clenched her fists, her nails digging into her skin until they hurt. In that moment, she understood. This was no accident. This was a trap, and she had walked right into it. The music room was so quiet that Elena could hear the blood rushing in her ears. The laptop had just closed, like a door to the past that she had worked so hard to bury, but now someone had suddenly opened it cruelly. The name Echo still echoed in her head. That code name disappeared on the same day the helicopter crashed into the Afghan mountains 15 years ago, burying 3 of her comrades in a sea of fire and black smoke. Since then, she had sworn never to touch it again. "Are you okay?" Marcus asked, his voice soft, but his eyes were cold and sharp as a knife. Elena was startled, quickly averting her gaze, trying to calm down. I'm just a little tired. Actually, I'm not sure I fixed it right. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Marcus chuckled. Coincidence? You removed a layer of noise designed to fool the entire military system in less than 5 minutes. Coincidence? That's amazing. Elena froze. Her hand unconsciously clenched the edge of her coat, as if to hide it along with the entire past. Who are you? Elena finally said. Her voice was choked, as if she had just been pulled back into the abyss of memory. Marcus chuckled softly, a smile that was neither warm nor mocking, but cold and vague. We both know the real question isn't who I am, it's, who are you? Elena clenched her jaw, her eyes averted. I'm just a music teacher. You've got the wrong person. Elena pursed her lips. The image of the helicopter spinning in the turbulence, the distorted radio waves, and then the flames engulfing it, all rushed back, making her choke. Marcus leaned forward, lowering his voice. Echo. Just one word, but it echoed like a gunshot to the temple. Elena immediately looked up, her eyes wide, panicked. Don't say that name. She backed away as if the physical distance could cut the rope around her neck. Marcus remained calm. Why not? It was you. It was always you. Only you could hear the wrong beat in the frequency. Only you could turn the waves into music. Only you could hear the war before it happened. That name never disappeared. You just tried to bury it. Elena held her forehead, trembling. I left everything. For the past 15 years, I have had nothing to do with the military. I am no longer Echo. Marcus was silent for a moment, then slowly pulled a thin envelope from his pocket and placed it on the table. Then explain this. Elena looked at the envelope like a time bomb. Hesitantly, she opened it. Inside was a copy of the classified report, date, time, coordinates of the helicopter crash in Afghanistan. The last page also had a note. Source of signal interference, suspected to be from equipment operated by Echo. She trembled, the words like a knife cutting open a wound that had never healed. You dug up my past. Marcus nodded slightly. I don't deny it. But Elena, he lowered his voice, his eyes serious. We didn't come to you to accuse you. We came to you because we needed you. Elena looked up, bewildered. Marcus continued, deep and steady. The world has changed. Nations no longer fight with guns and bullets. Radio waves, digital signals, electronic warfare. That is the real battlefront. And you, Echo, are one of the few who have seen the nature of that battlefront. Elena laughed awkwardly, but her eyes were filled with tears. You think I will come back? After all? After 3 deaths? At my hands? Marcus said sternly, No, I thought you would come back because of those 3 deaths. You created a security system that saved hundreds of lives, but you let the memories of your 3 comrades weigh you down for 15 years. This is your only chance to turn your pain into something useful, to make amends, or at least not leave the next generation to repeat the tragedy. The room fell silent again. Outside, the sounds of children playing in the schoolyard echoed in the distance, a stark contrast to the gloomy atmosphere here. Elena took a deep breath. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she bit her lip. I don't want to go back. Marcus shrugged, as expected. He stood up, picked up his laptop, and adjusted his jacket. You can refuse today, but remember, secrets never sleep. They will come to you, or you will come to us. Both, sooner or later. Before he walked out the door, he stopped and turned his head. And one more thing. Echo. That name still rings in the ears of many people. Don't think I'm the only one who remembers it. The door closed softly, leaving Elena sitting alone. Her trembling hand placed on the report, her eyes fixed on the 2 cold capital letters. Echo. The peaceful world she had worked so hard to build suddenly shattered like glass. The music room was empty. The dim yellow light from the overhead light bulb fell on Elena's pale face. On the table, the envelope Marcus had left behind still lay. two cold capital letters engraved on it. Echo. She sat motionless for a long time. All the sounds outside, the laughter of children, the wind whistling through the windows, seemed to fade away, replaced by a tidal wave of memories. Elena closed her eyes, and in that moment she was no longer the quiet music teacher in the small town. She found herself in her uniform again, headphones in, eyes glued to the glowing green screen. She was Echo again. In those days, electronic warfare was still a foreign concept to most of the world. But in the cramped command rooms, Echo was a name that made many officers breathe a sigh of relief. She had an uncanny ability to hear aberrations in signal waves, like a musician hearing an out-of-tune note. With her ears trained in music since childhood, combined with a sharp mind in mathematics and engineering, Elena could distinguish natural noise from artificial signals, recognize which was a trap set by the enemy and which was a way out. The radio security system she designed saved the lives of hundreds of soldiers. One time, a convoy of wounded soldiers was ambushed in a narrow valley. The enemy threw up white noise, obscuring the entire GPS map. Echo tuned the frequency to a three-note rhythm she called the life chord, and in a split second, the connection was restored. Thanks to that, the convoy found its way out. That day, 142 survivors returned. In the barracks, soldiers often said to each other, "Echo doesn't need to look at a map, she hears the way." But then the fateful mission came. It was a pitch-black winter night in the mountains of Afghanistan. Echo was on the front line, dozens of signal bands tangled in front of her like a chaotic soundtrack. The Alpha Special Forces team, her three closest teammates, were on a helicopter carrying emergency medical supplies. The pilot kept reporting back. Bad weather, strong winds. Echo needed to guide the way through the valley. Elena typed continuously on the keyboard, her ears straining to distinguish each frequency amid the electromagnetic storm. But the enemy was prepared. They launched a new type of reflected noise, turning all communication channels into a roaring mess. "Echo, the signal is fading. Can you hear it?" The Alpha team leader's voice rang out in the headset, mixed with the whistling wind. Elena bit her lip, turned the frequency, increased the power. The screen flashed red continuously. She still believed she could get away with it, like so many times before. But no. A crackling electric explosion rang out. The signal suddenly broke, like a song being ripped apart mid-song. On the radar screen, the bright dot representing the helicopter lurched, losing altitude. "Echo, we have no control. Heading instructions, please." Elena shouted into the microphone. "Alpha, hold heading 270, hold altitude, But the sound from their side was only a long howl. Then, a flash of light on the screen. A fireball exploded in the middle of the mountainside. The entire Alpha team, her brothers who had trusted her completely, disappeared in a matter of seconds. The report later read, "Cause: unexpected signal interference. No personal error identified." But Elena knew. She was the only one at the control station that day. She was responsible. The three names of her teammates were engraved in her heart: Captain Ray, Gunner Lewis, Technician Sam. They had laughed together, called her Radio Angel. And now, only ashes were scattered on the mountainside. That night, Echo sat alone in her room, taking off her headphones, her hands shaking. The sound of typing still haunted her fingers, but it no longer led to music or life signals, but only to a dead void. She cried her eyes out. And then, in a desperate decision, Elena wrote a letter of resignation. No one understood why a talented specialist like Echo had left at the height of her career. Only she knew. She couldn't bear to have her ears filled with the sound of the helicopter explosion that night. She left everything. She left behind her rank, her records, and even the name Echo. Elena went to a small coastal town, changed her name, and lived in an old second-floor apartment. She applied to teach music to children in an elementary school. There, no one knew who she was. No one asked about her past. They only saw a gentle teacher, patiently showing her students each note, each chord. Music became a refuge. It did not betray, did not distort, did not fall from the sky. It was just pure sounds, simple children's songs, melodies that helped children sleep. Elena told herself, if I could just live like this, maybe I would find peace again. 15 years passed. She almost believed that the past was asleep, until the fateful concert, until the microphone exploded and Echo's hands returned unconsciously, until Colonel Marcus Hayes looked her straight in the eye and whispered, "Echo." Elena opened her eyes. Tears were rolling down her cheeks without her noticing. Her hand was still on the confidential report envelope, shaking. "Echo is dead," she whispered as if to reassure herself. "I'm just Elena, just a music teacher." But deep down she knew the truth. Echo was never dead. Echo was just waiting for the day to be called again. And that day came. The next morning, a light drizzle covered the elementary school grounds. Thin streaks of water spread across the glass windows, forming lines like unfinished music. Elena sat in the music room, her hand still resting lightly on the keys. But this time, no melody played. She just kept quiet, listening to the quiet tapping of the rain outside, like an echo from a distant world. She barely slept last night. The name Echo kept ringing in her head, along with the image of the burning helicopter. Marcus's words were still etched in her mind. This is the only chance to turn pain into something useful. Elena wanted to shake it off, but couldn't. The door to the music room suddenly opened. Marcus Hayes walked in, holding a rain-soaked umbrella, his khaki jacket still dripping with water. He didn't knock, nor wait for an invitation, but walked straight in as if this was his own territory. "Sorry to bother you." His voice was hoarse, but it had a familiar rhythm, calm, firm. Elena was startled for a moment, then stood up immediately, her eyes alert. "What are you doing here? I told you I'm not coming back." Marcus chuckled, put down his umbrella, and pulled up a chair to sit across from her. "I didn't come to force you. I came to talk. If you still refuse after that, I'll leave. But at least, listen to me once." Elena was silent, her hand still clutching the keys. Marcus watched her for a few seconds, then lowered his voice. "Elena, or should I say Echo, no matter what, you're still a soldier, and that soldier never disappeared." Elena laughed dryly. "That soldier is dead. You're 15 years too late, Colonel." Marcus tilted his head, his voice slow. "If you were really dead, you wouldn't have deciphered the code in my laptop last night. You wouldn't have trembled when you heard your old code name. You wouldn't have stayed up all night for the names of your 3 fallen comrades. The dead don't hurt anymore, but you still hurt. That means Echo is still alive." Elena bit her lip, her eyes red. "What do you want from me?" Marcus was silent for a long time, as if considering what to say. Then he placed a thick file on the table, tied with black cloth. On the cover were only 3 words, "Resonance Program. This is why I'm looking for you." Marcus pushed the file toward Elena. She glanced at it, hesitantly opening it. Inside were dozens of pages of documents, signal station diagrams, frequency charts, field reports from the latest conflict zones. The more she looked, the heavier Elena felt her heart. The enemy has developed a new generation of electronic weapons. They don't just jam, they use waves to destroy the information structure, paralyzing the entire communication system, Marcus explained, his voice even. "In a few years, every war will start with a push of a radio button, not a shot. We need a training program to prepare for that." Elena shook her head. "Then find someone else. I'm no longer an expert." Marcus said sternly, "No, only you, Echo, because you don't just understand frequencies, you hear them. For you, electronic warfare is not theory, it's music, and it's that approach that will save the young soldiers, keep them from making the same mistakes we made." Elena looked at him, her eyes brimming with tears. "Do you think I'll use those kids to redeem myself? You don't understand. I lost everything. I don't want anyone to be like me." Marcus leaned back, his gaze softening a little. "I lost someone, Elena. I know how it feels. But I've learned one thing. The only way to avoid tragedy is to teach the next generation how to avoid it. You can continue to live as a teacher, teaching children's songs, but you can also teach them to listen to the rhythm of the battlefield so that when the signal is distorted, they still have a chance to survive. That's your choice. The room fell silent. The sound of the rain outside was still pounding, in sync with the ticking of the clock. Elena looked down at her hands. The fingers that had played Mozart for the children were the same fingers that had tapped the keyboard to guide hundreds of soldiers. Leading a training program, she whispered as if talking to herself. I never thought of that. Elena closed her eyes, a tear rolling down her cheek. The image of the burning helicopter came back to her, but this time mixed with the innocent laughter of children learning music. Two opposing worlds collided inside her. Finally, she looked up, looking Marcus straight in the eyes. If I agree, I won't be normal Elena anymore. I'll be Echo again. Marcus smiled slightly, but the smile was not proud, but quiet. Maybe you never stopped being Echo. You just forgot. Elena sighed, trying to find a reason to refuse. All Elena had wanted for years was peace. A small classroom, some soft music, and innocent children who never asked about her past. But that peace was now like a thin layer of ice. Just a light tap would crack it. Marcus stood silently in front of her, not pushing, nor turning away. He was patient, as if he knew that, no matter how many years Elena had avoided him, she would eventually have to face him. Elena, or Echo, whichever you prefer. I'm not here to accuse you. I'm here because out there, the children you love won't be safe if we don't do something. You know better than anyone the world is changing, and only people like you can feel things that ordinary people can't. Elena looked up, her eyes flickering. I caused their deaths. 3 comrades. Do you know, since that day, I haven't been able to hear music the same way? Every beat of the drum sounded like the sound of a helicopter's blades whistling before crashing. Every echo was like a cry for help, lost in the chaotic frequency. You want me to come back? I'm not sure I can. Marcus sighed, not arguing. He moved closer, bending down to her eye level. It's because you're haunted that you're the only one who fits. Those who haven't experienced it will see the waves as just numbers, just data. But you, Echo, you hear the soul hidden in them. You turn the waves into rhythm and the rhythm into a weapon. I don't need a warrior with a gun. I need someone who can listen to the world. Elena was silent. In her mind, fragments of memories tore apart. The control room with dozens of screens, the arms raised to signal stable signal. Then the moment of turbulence sweeping through, a swirling white wave, all turned into chaos. The alarms, the shouts, and finally, the absolute silence after the crash. Her eyes were red. If I agree, then everything has to be my way. I won't touch the weapons. I won't destroy anything. What I use is just music. Marcus frowned slightly. Music? Elena nodded, her voice trembling but clear. Music is not just for entertainment. It is rhythm. It is frequency. It is the way people feel the vibrations in the air. I will train them that way. Let them feel the rhythm like they feel the enemy breathing. Let them read the frequency like they read their own heartbeat. Marcus listened, his stern eyes gradually shining with hope. Elena continued, this time her voice no longer trembling but filled with determination. I will turn this class into a wave laboratory. The children will not only learn notes, they will learn to distinguish frequencies, to recognize hidden radio waves in sound, to react to rhythms, to coordinate with each other. If you really believe that echo is still useful, then that is the only thing I can do. Marcus nodded, almost smiling. Music or war? Both require discipline. Both require feeling. I will accept your conditions. But as soon as Marcus finished speaking, Elena turned away, her hands clenched so tightly that they trembled. I warn you, Once you enter, there will be no turning back. I have already escaped once, and the price was 15 years of sleepless nights. If I fail this time, I am not sure I will have the courage to stand up again." Marcus placed a firm hand on her shoulder, his voice deep. "Your only failure, Echo, is to continue running away." The words fell into Elena's ears like a solid drumbeat, causing her chest to tremble. She was silent for a long time before letting out a long breath. "Okay, I will try, but just try." Marcus nodded slightly, not saying anything more. He understood that the moment Elena said the two words "okay," the wheel of fate had begun to roll. And Elena, the woman who once swore she would just be an ordinary music teacher, has now accidentally set foot back on the path she thought she had left forever. The rain had stopped by the time Marcus left the music room, leaving Elena alone in the thick, wood-scented air and the soft whistling of the wind through the windows. On the table, the resonance file was still open, its frequency diagrams as confusing as a piece of music without a conductor. Elena leaned back in her chair, her eyes half closed. In her head, the two worlds were still violently colliding. Children's laughter mixed with the sound of broken helicopter blades, the rhythm of the music mixed with the piercing frequencies. Had she said yes? A compromise or a new sentence? 3 days later, she received an unaddressed envelope. Inside were her temporary identification card, a train ticket to Washington, D.C., and a brief handwritten note. "Monday, 9 a.m., Anacostia Training Center. Your only chance to turn music into a lifesaver. MH." Elena sat for a long time with the ticket in her hand. The ticket was flimsy but heavy as a piano. She knew if she boarded that train, she would no longer be Miss Marlowe, the teacher of the children of Lake Michigan. But if she didn't go, would she survive another 15 years of sleepless nights? The night before her departure, Elena taught her usual weekend music class. She played the familiar nursery rhyme for the children, her childish voice echoing in the small room. Looking at their innocent faces, she suddenly realized, out there in the world, other children, someone's students, also needed to hear music before the war broke out. That feeling gripped her heart like a siren, both painful and urgent. The next morning, the train pulled out of the station in a gray haze. Elena sat by the window, watching the trees by the lake recede, the roofs of the small town disappearing into the mist. She ran her fingers over her new ID card, E. Navarro, printed coldly, and wondered, was that still her name or just another mask? As the train crossed the steel bridge, the sound of metal tapping under the wheels echoed like a drumbeat. Elena closed her eyes, listening to even the slightest vibration. In that moment, she understood. She could no longer hide. Music and war were, after all, just two different ways of hearing life and death. And perhaps it was time for her to teach others how to listen to them. The train whistled, rushing into the mist. Elena opened her eyes. Washington was waiting, and with it, Echo. The name she had cursed was being called again. In the Anacostia Center's underground conference room, the harsh fluorescent lights cast a shadow over the stern, uniformed faces. The atmosphere was so heavy that Elena felt as if she had just entered a courtroom, not a lecture. On the table were files bearing the words "Echo Classified," and a few of the older officers looked at her, a mixture of skepticism and caution. Colonel Marcus Hayes sat at the head of the table, tapping his pen on the wood, signaling her to begin. Elena took a deep breath, feeling her heart pounding in her chest like a prelude. She walked to the control panel, turned on the small transmitter she had brought with her, and placed it next to it. A violin. A wave of murmurs immediately spread throughout the room. A lieutenant colonel laughed sarcastically. "Miss Navarro, we're here to hear about electronic warfare, not a summer concert." Elena didn't respond right away. She just tilted her head, drawing out a short phrase. 4 slow, clear notes. Immediately, the signal device on the table showed a graph of oscillations that matched each beat. She raised her head, her eyes determined. Electronic warfare is like a symphony. The enemy will mix in fake signals, like wrong notes inserted into the melody. If soldiers learn to listen, to distinguish between the correct beat and the fake beat, they will recognize the abnormality faster than any algorithm. A large screen lit up, images from the test exercise. Soldiers were jammed, struggling to communicate. Elena adjusted the transmitter, then pulled the bow again, recreating the clean wave beat. The signal graph on the screen stabilized again. The atmosphere in the room fell. Several officers who had been laughing at her fell silent, hunching over to stare at the screen. Elena finished with a short, decisive sentence. Music is more than just art. It is the science of rhythm and frequency. If your brothers can learn to listen like musicians, they will survive in the dense noise. Marcus quietly closed his pen, tapping it slowly on the table. Then he looked straight at Elena. Okay, we will try it your way. The training room was bathed in the pale yellow light of dusk. The steady rhythmic sounds came from Elena's hands as she gently tapped the small drum placed beside her. The sound was not too loud, but it spread like waves, leading the entire room into an invisible rhythm. At first, the soldiers looked at each other suspiciously. No one thought that those simple beats could make a difference. But then, every step, every breath, every movement of their bodies began to blend with that melody. Elena did not shout or scream like the military instructors before. She stood in the center, quietly, using only rhythm and her eyes to guide. The soldiers, who were used to sharp orders, now found themselves drawn into something soft but strangely powerful. The drum beat 3 times, paused for a beat, then repeated. In that pause, the soldiers were forced to listen to their own breath, to listen to their teammates. They began to feel the synchronization, the trust. After the first practice, there were still skeptical whispers. What's the point of this? We're not artists. This is the army. Elena heard it all, but she didn't react. She just nodded, continuing to repeat her method. The next day, the drums sounded again, but this time, she interspersed them with whistling, sometimes tapping a pen on a metal table. Each sound had a different frequency, a different pitch, and she showed them how to react quickly, decisively, like a natural reflex. Soon, the whispers turned to concentration. The once disdainful faces now followed her every move. There was recognition in their eyes, a slow-growing respect. Marcus stood at a distance and watched. He didn't interfere, just silently watching Elena transform a motley group of soldiers into a unified whole. He realized that what iron discipline couldn't do, Elena had done with rhythm and patience. When the drills ended, a soldier approached, scratching his head awkwardly. Miss, the drum beat today reminds me of when I was little, when my father taught me to concentrate by tapping the table with a spoon. It feels strange, but I think I understand. Elena smiled, not answering. That smile was enough to make the soldier blush and turn away. As time passed, the atmosphere of the barracks gradually changed. The drills were no longer a heavy duty, but a moment they waited for. After dinner, sometimes a few soldiers would try tapping the table with their hands, imitating her, then laughing loudly when the whole group joined in. Elena didn't just train. She made them find a common rhythm, but just when the piece seemed to have taken root, an unexpected incident occurred. That evening, the sky was pitch black, no moon, no stars. The barracks was quiet, only the wind whistling through the barbed wire. Elena was packing up her small instrument when suddenly, from the east of the barracks, a deafening explosion rang out. The ground shook, dust flew into her face. The alarm bells blared, red lights flashed repeatedly. The soldiers rushed out of the tents in panic. A column of black smoke rose from the fuel depot. Screams rang out. Fire! The depot exploded. Is anyone trapped in there? Marcus appeared immediately, his voice booming like thunder. Everyone hold your positions! Alpha team with me! Bravo team, put out the fire! In the chaos, Elena sensed something unusual. The explosion just now did not sound like a technical failure. It was too clean, too precise, like a signal. She rushed towards the group of confused soldiers, her voice calm but decisive. "Follow my rhythm! 1, 2, 3!" She slammed her hand down on the metal box next to her, creating a loud sound. The panicked faces looked up, reflexively looking at her. Elena repeated the rhythm, short, pause, long. It was the sequence of signals she had taught in drills, the thing to synchronize actions. "3 of you follow me to put out the fire. The rest of you help evacuate," she shouted, then led the charge straight into the black smoke. The red flames engulfed an entire corner of the warehouse. The heat was intense. The black smoke billowed, making people suffocate. Elena pulled up her mask, rushed in with 2 soldiers. In the haze, she heard a faint cry for help. A young soldier was trapped under a collapsed iron beam. Without thinking, Elena and her comrades struggled to lift the beam, pulling him out. The acrid smoke blurred her vision, but the drumbeat in her head beat steadily. The same rhythm she had created for them. It kept her calm, kept the others from panicking. As the last soldier was pulled out, a second explosion rang out, more violent, knocking the group to the ground. Flames erupted, engulfing the entire warehouse. In the flickering light of the fire, Elena looked up at Marcus. He was standing in front of her, his eyes sharp as knives. This was not an accident. The air was thick. Amidst the sparks that were burning the fuel warehouse, a chilling truth flashed through everyone's minds. Someone had broken in. The training room, which usually resounded with soft music, was unusually quiet. After the sudden incident the day before, the atmosphere had changed dramatically. The soldiers who had once doubted Elena now not only respected her, but also gradually believed in her unusual methods. They themselves, through patient practice, had begun to distinguish between rhythm and discord in the chaotic picture of the battlefield. But Elena knew clearly, respect was not enough. That incident, an intercom system that had suddenly been disrupted, leading to the patrol team almost falling into a trap, could not have been accidental. There was a hand in the dark that had intervened, and if she couldn't find it, the melodies she had painstakingly taught them would only ring out in vain. Marcus was the first to break the silence. "We've checked all the equipment. There's nothing broken, but the signal is still distorted, as if someone had misaligned the notes." Elena looked up. The notes. That's right. A tune with a wrong note can break the whole piece. Likewise, a saboteur can leave a wrong note in the signal. "We won't look for the culprit with our eyes or our guns," Elena said firmly. "We'll listen. Listen with our ears, with the rhythm you've practiced." Some of the soldiers looked at each other, curious and worried, but they believed her. In the reinforced bunker, Elena played back the entire communications log from the night of the incident. The static was mixed with the broken waves. To a normal person, it would sound like chaos, but her soldiers had been trained to find the music in the chaos. "Listen like an orchestra," Elena instructed. "Where there's a beat, there's another hand." James, a young cadet, frowned, tilting his head in concentration. He raised his hand. "Listen. This part sounds like the drums are out of tune. The 3 beat instead of the 4. Someone's jamming in." Elena nodded. "Good. Let's take that out." They filtered the sound, encoded the waveform, and superimposed the original signal with the noise. The difference appeared like a black ink blot on white paper, a different kind of rhythm, not accidental, not natural, but intentional. They noticed that the noise repeated a pattern, like a refrain. Not everyone could have created such a coincidence. Only someone who knew the transmission frequency, knew the team's channel-changing habits. "There's a traitor among us," James blurted out. The air was heavy. Everyone held their breath. Elena kept her voice calm. "Don't be so quick to accuse. We'll find out the truth with music, not blood." Elena didn't jump to conclusions. She asked for all the communication channels to be checked again that day. The soldiers, under her guidance, analyzed each fragment of interference. Each played a part, like an orchestra. Some listened to drums, some to strings, some to trumpets. Finally, they found a faint sound on a side channel, barely noticeable, a repetitive rhythm of metallic tapping. It sounded meaningless, but when the group encoded it together, it formed letters. Put together, R-I-C-H. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to one young soldier, Richard. Richard paled, stammering. "No, not me. I didn't." Marcus stepped forward angrily, but Elena raised her hand to stop him. Her gaze was fixed on Richard, not fierce but cold enough to make him shiver. "Sounds don't lie," she said slowly. "In my world, out of tune can't be hidden. You leave a mark." Richard collapsed into a chair, sweating. Finally, under pressure, he confessed that he had been bribed, providing information to outsiders in exchange for money and the promise of being released from the army. He thought that by hiding behind distorted signals, no one would discover him, but it was what Elena taught him. Listening to music in chaos, that exposed him. As they were escorted away, the remaining soldiers stood still. In their eyes, the respect for Elena was no longer simply respect for a trainer, but rather absolute trust for a leader. Elena looked around, her deep voice resounding. "You have found the truth yourself. I only showed you the drum beat, and this music, you played it yourself. Remember, in war, the enemy is not only hidden in the darkness or gunpowder. It can be hidden in the sound, in the rhythm of our own. If our ears are sharp enough, we will hear the truth." Marcus stood to one side, looking at Elena with a thoughtful and somewhat admiring gaze. He understood clearly. From this moment, his army had changed. And the woman codenamed Echo, the one who once wanted to bury the past, had now once again become their guiding spirit. In the months after the investigation, Elena's name was known far and wide in the electronic security world. Her lectures, her unique training method based on music, rhythm, and the subtlety of each wave vibration, turned the young soldiers, who were only familiar with the sound of guns and the training ground, into listeners with unusual ears. They called her by a name that was both respectful and admiring, Symbol of Life. But at that moment, when admiring eyes surrounded her, Elena felt a cold void in her chest. Every joy has its limits, but the old obsession had never been let go. One late afternoon, when the training ground was gradually immersed in the sunset, Colonel Marcus walked in. He stood quietly outside the classroom door, watching the young soldiers packing up their equipment at Elena's command. Only when she turned around did Marcus approach, his voice hoarse. "You did better than anyone could, but I see in your eyes there is still something that has not been let go." Elena was momentarily stunned. That sentence seemed to touch her secret fear. She avoided his gaze, but Marcus did not blame her. He just sighed softly, placing a heavy but warm hand on her shoulder. "They are gone, Elena. No one blames you. If they were alive, they would be proud that you saved these soldiers. Don't keep yourself trapped in the past. Give yourself a chance to forgive yourself." The words were simple, but they tore apart the curtain that Elena had bound herself to for 15 years. Her shoulders trembled, the corners of her eyes stung. That night, for the first time in so many years, Elena decided to return to the old base, where the helicopter that day crashed into the mountainside, burying her 3 closest comrades. The path leading to the memorial was covered with dust. Elena walked slowly, each step heavy. Before her eyes, 3 cold gray stone tablets appeared under the silent moonlight. Her whole body seemed to freeze, but then Elena forced herself to move forward. She carried a sheet of music, unfinished notes that she had written for the group years ago, but had not finished before the fateful day. Sitting down next to the memorial, her trembling hands placed the paper on top, her voice choked in the wind. "I'm sorry. I left you guys behind, but this music finally saved someone else. I hope somewhere you guys can forgive me." Tears fell on each page, blurring the musical notation. The quiet night had only the faint sound of the wind, as if the 3 souls were listening. Elena didn't beg for release, but in that moment she felt the burden of the past 15 years seem to crumble. giving way to a gentler pain, the pain of memory, no longer a chain. A few weeks later, the lights came back on. Elena walked in, her eyes different, no longer evasive but steady. Before her were rows of young soldiers, their faces eager and trusting. Behind them, on a wooden platform, were a set of musical instruments and a transmitter. Elena held her slender baton, her hand raised. "Listen," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Every sound carries its own message. Like music, if there is a wrong note, the whole symphony changes. It is our job to recognize it and correct it." The class fell silent, their ears straining to follow her words. In that gaze, Elena suddenly saw the silhouettes of 3 comrades, smiling, standing between them. She took a deep breath, lowered her baton. The music played, mixed with the electronic signals flashing, opening a new chapter. Elena understood she had truly returned, not to run away, but to live on, and to pass on the music that had saved her, and now saved hundreds of others.